Hey everybody, my name is Luis Giraldo, Chief Experience Officer here at ScalePad, and it's my pleasure today to welcome Travis Harris. Travis, thanks for being here.
Yeah, happy to be here. It's going to be a great evening tonight.
Now, we were chatting in the car on the way here to get set up for this conversation, and as casual as we're making it, I was really interested in hearing a little bit of your history because you joined Backup Radar and have gone through literally every position possible. Of course, Backup Radar was a bootstrap startup in the early days, and so I think a lot of people wear many hats in startups. But you went from sales to sales management to sales ops, then to success, then to product management. And then after the ScalePad acquisition, you were also very heavily involved in some of the integration operations and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm sure you've learned a thing or two about the different moving parts of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a really exciting journey, getting a lot of experience from various different levels, talking to partners and prospects at various different stages of their individual journeys and really learning a lot of what really motivates them and what the real purpose of what they're looking for and the problems they're facing and how our product can then step in and start dealing with solving a lot of those very diverse problems. It's been interesting to learn that a lot of these MSPs obviously are doing the same thing. They're solving the same problems, but doing them in totally different ways. One partner to the next who has totally different experience and different challenges that they're dealing with. And it's been really great to be able to be on the product side where we can make that same product fit into all these different unique molds basically to solve these different problems all from one configuration basically.
Well, and it's interesting, I think, because part of what MSP vendors are kind of obligated to do is be able to meet MSPs wherever they happen to be on that journey. And that journey is a very wide spectrum of ranging operational maturity or sizes or number of clientele. And what strikes me as interesting is that over the years of the initial growth of an MSP, there's so much organic growth that some of the things that they have in their environments just may have gone unchecked or untweaked for years, namely, the retention policies or backup strategies that they might have. Because when you have one or two clients, it's one thing to just set them up how you saw fit. But as you add 10, 20, 30, 50 clients, suddenly going back to review everything at once is a big ask, a big lift. And so I guess my question to you is, without getting too philosophical, maybe let's talk about some of the best practices that you've seen that are really helping MSPs improve their backup management or their backup reporting. So I think there's a big gap there across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, I guess the biggest thing that I found from talking to partners ahead of time prior to even using Backup Radar, the challenges that they've been facing. As you said, there's pretty big gaps in how that's been operated in various different maturity levels. But the biggest thing that I've seen consistently a challenge is just not having standardization in place to really understand what actually is performing. They might have an expectation of, my backups were configured to run on 7 days a week or 5 days a week or whatever the expectation of what they were implementing. But the reality of what actually is in place as of today is sometimes shocking to them when they start putting Backup Radar in place and they tell Backup Radar that, this job runs 7 days a week. And then suddenly they're getting flags that, hey, this hasn't run. They're like, well, why hasn't that run? And they go and look into it and realize like, whoa, someone changed this to only run 5 days a week. And that might have been a long time ago and it's been running like this for so long. But just the way that they were monitoring or not being able to monitor that prior to, wasn't able to identify that as being a challenge.
Well, and of course, the call that you get about recovering a lost file or deleted file is going to exactly be during that time frame that was not backing up that you thought it was.
That's always how it works, right?
Well, it strikes me as maybe tired now that a lot of most MSP vendors in the marketplace always claim to deliver more efficiency. And it just sounds like a gratuitous offer these days. Oh, more efficiency, become more efficient. And we often talk about going from hours to minutes in terms of the time spent managing backups. So give me the reality check on this. Like, how does Backup Radar actually create efficiencies that go from hours to minutes? And what are some of the MSPs experiences that you've seen out there really sort of owning up to that claim?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, it certainly can be. It depends on how your practices were beforehand, obviously. But the majority, as we talked about beforehand, there's various different ways that MSPs have been monitoring their backups. Some of them are very, very painstakingly manual spreadsheets on a daily basis. Others are checking mailboxes. Others are checking tickets. The general consistent practice, though, is having to check backups to some extent. There's manual effort involved in checking backups to see if things are running, to see if things are failing and what they need to resolve. The whole purpose of putting Backup Radar in place is to automate and pass off all of the manual checking practices. Don't check anything. I'll Backup Radar to be there monitoring, looking for things on a 24/7 basis and flagging the things that are a problem that you need to go in and resolve. And you can define whatever that might be based on your different workflows and your practices of what's important. But going from hours of manual checking, looking for problems, to minutes a day of actually just remediating issues, and not just remediating issues in general, but remediating the important issues. So the issues that might not be top priority or might self-resolve itself in an hour on that hourly backup job that's going to kick back in again, that might not be something you need to focus your attention on. But solving the things that have already hit that threshold of this is a problem, I need a human to intervene and look at that, those are the minutes that you can now spend rather than the checking aspect.
And I mentioned the organic growth, and this is maybe another area where it kind of shows its teeth a bit, because again, when you have 2 clients and you're getting started, it's okay to check your backups manually in that shared mailbox or what have you. But I think we just get comfortable with that process. And once you're at 50 clients, suddenly you realize we're spending 3 or 4 hours every morning of somebody's full-time schedule literally checking emails, which are prone to human error. You could miss something, or you could have had an email that didn't even arrive, a stalled backup appliance or something that didn't even notify. And so I love this idea that, you can take away all that human error or human effort, really, to convert it into just remediating the issues and addressing the backup problems. So,
yeah, it's definitely the journey escapes them, I guess, a lot of times, where they don't realize they're into this process and it's working, but they're just losing time. And I've heard scary stories many times before from partners saying, yeah, we're checking things, but we're checking so much, like we're spending so much time that we just have to stop checking things and the stuff that we aren't able to actually monitor. And those are the lower priorities that we, fingers crossed, are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And we just need to solve it in a different way, basically.
So speaking of standardization, this is a word that also gets thrown around quite a lot. And I think, at some point it starts losing its meaning because you forget sort of what are the things that you need to be working on. And an example of that is, I think you start as a small MSP with a couple of clients and you're able to monitor your backups by checking those email mailboxes and just manually reviewing backup logs and such. But then you go to 10, 20, 30, 50 clients and you're still doing it the same way. You haven't checked that process, or you haven't considered challenging the status quo, so to speak, to say, why are we still doing it this way? And before you know it, people are spending, 3-4 hours a day to check the backup logs across, 50 clients. So it just strikes me as one of those things that creeps up because of the lack of an ability to change the process. And so I'm sure you've seen many MSPs reduce this consumption of time from those hours to mere minutes, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the, in the conversations I've had with prospects and people who are interested in Backup Radar, but weren't necessarily ready to pull the trigger. A lot of them were having conversations saying, yeah, we're struggling. Yeah, we've grown. We've added more clients and our clients have grown. So the number of backups have grown. It's getting out of hand. We're spending too much time, but we're not sure if it's what we need. We're looking on standardizing on one backup application. And we think that's going to be the best way to deal with it. Moving to one backup application, it's standardized. Everything's going to be better. Grass is always greener on the other side, right? And sometimes that's the way that they'll go. Other times they understand that the process is what they need to standardize, not necessarily the tool. Because there's a lot of times when you can't necessarily fit all the actual partner or client needs into one box. These backup applications are not necessarily one size fits all. And so you have to sometimes adopt multiple other backup applications for other purpose-built
other needs. Yeah.
Excuse me. Exactly. And so they have to look at what are these processes? How are we monitoring these things? What is this retention policy and the strategy that we're adopting for all of these different partners or these different backup needs, basically?
Well, I think the standardization there of wanting to have a single backup platform is an admirable desire, but not often very close to reality because, as soon as an MSP decides, we're going to switch backup platforms, we're making the shift, that could be a 2 or 3 year project to move from one platform to another, during which time you're managing the two platforms, of course. Then comes along a big client with a compliance requirement to keep all their historical retention and backup reports and everything else. And you got to hold on to that backup platform. In fact, I think some of the data we have about backup systems shows that the average MSP is managing anywhere between 3 and 5 backup platforms. Yep. And so incredibly complex, of course, as that grows without being checked. And the reporting is really the key piece there. Yeah. So Backup Radar, of course, summarizes that, centralizes that, removes a ton of the noise of having to manage that externally.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's times where they will realize that this backup product is perfect for this scenario. These are the types of backups I want for this, whether it's this particular partner, it might be based on the size of the client they're dealing with or the particular style of backups that they're dealing with, whereas this one performs better here. And how are they going to produce a report, right? When you're dealing with multiple backup applications, if they want to consolidate on that reporting, they're struggling in that side of things. And a lot of times that's one of the motivators to think that if I just got it all on one product, I can generate a report. I can have everything consolidated. And it's, as you said, admirable, but sometimes it's a pretty big challenge to even try to accomplish that. And might not necessarily be the right fit.
Now, the other piece I think that is one of those things that catches up with you is management of and documentation of retention policies and just how you're backing up any one client or environment. And again, this is one of those things that as you evolve, it's easy to keep track of it with 2 or 3 or a handful of clients. As soon as it's 50, the situation has grown organically. You may not even have a standard approach to retention policies until something forces you to go back and look. And we've had partners tell us, Backup Radar made us revisit our retention policies because it was the only way to get this under control. And so it's kind of like I feel proud that we forced a little bit of, process into the businesses this way. But, you've been a lot closer to some of these experiences. I'm sure there's a little bit of pushback on this from time to time as well. Tell me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. There's definitely there's the perception that software should just be automatic and just work. And so you tie in the API, you send the stuff over and it just magically works. But the reality of it is there's the process behind it. What's the expectation to actually happen? And there's been a lot of pushback in the past when you have a very, we'll say, messy configuration unstandardized backup configuration where you're on a call with a partner who's trying to get things dialed into the way that their workflow is, and what's the schedule for this? How often does this run? and they have no idea, and they can't actually even go back to any documentation because that documentation is so old that things have changed. It's gone through multiple different people, and changes in processes weren't maintained and weren't updated, and they have no idea. So it's something that we proudly work with them on, that to really sometimes hold their hand through, okay, these are the best ways to take that messy configuration, unstandardization, and get it into something clean that you can be proud of. And that's a matter of, all right, let's start off in small different batches of it. Backup Radar is we'll set it to the most granular, and we'll see when it's flagging no results. And then you can go and look at those ones to actually make the modifications that's necessary. And sometimes that's, oh, well, it doesn't actually run 7 days a week. It runs 5 days a week. Is that okay? Do I change my configuration in Backup Radar so that it's only expecting it 5 days a week? Or is this actually not meeting the standards that I have set for my client, and I actually have to go change the backup application to conform to the standard?
Of course.
And so it can go both ways, just depending on what the requirements are. But at the end of that process, we usually have quite proud and very exciting testimonials in regards to how Backup Radar has completely just changed the way that they monitor backups and really helped them get a standard in place.
Now, I'm sure that in your role as Director of Success at ScalePad today, you obviously are giving a lot of advice to our team members as they work with new and different and sometimes unexpected situations that they come across during onboarding. And I was curious just to ask you if there's been one thing that you've noticed that you would say, I would always recommend MSPs try to avoid this one thing when thinking about their backup strategy. And I know I'm putting you on the spot, but something might come to mind as sort of the one thing.
It's going to sound funny, but don't call all your devices the same name.
Okay.
It's something that, again, if you don't have practices and nomenclature in place and something like that, the number of times where we see a maturing MSP come in and
all their appliances are BK01.
Oh yeah, DC01. The number of times, hey, I got 15 DC01. And it's like, okay, well, we have different ways we can work with that to help kind of break those apart and whatnot. But it's extra effort and it's extra challenge, and it's not as straightforward and whatnot. So having a good nomenclature and sticking to that is probably the most valuable piece that I can say.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like these patterns really come from the early days of being a smaller provider. Everything from where on the IP range that you stick devices on their static IPs, to what names you give them, to even what IP address ranges you sometimes use. Before the VPNs and before all that stuff, there was times when you just made the same network subnet for every client and had everything the same. And so those things come to bite you, of course. And it's really tough to learn this without going through it. And so I imagine some of these things are equally true for the backup space.
Yeah.
Now, with the backup, I think, world changing, a lot of applications moving to the cloud, I hear MSPs constantly talking about how, we don't really need to back up on-prem systems anymore because all the data is in the cloud. But I constantly hear about cloud vendors also losing data and having issues. And this is often a misconception that the cloud vendor is looking after the backups of that data and or the reporting and keeping it safe, but it's often not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of conversations in that regards for primarily more on the prospect side of things, where they feel that, oh no, all of my stuff's in the cloud. It's covered. I don't need to do any backups. And it's just like, pause for a second and, okay, you think so? Like if you called the cloud provider, you're sure that you'd be able to restore the data from that. And they pause for a second and they think about it, like, let me go check on that.
And I think this harks back to a little bit of the due diligence in bringing on a new vendor to your MSP. We're just going through this because the council that I sit on at CompTIA, with the SaaS Ecosystem Advisory Council, was working on a checklist of helping MSPs get a little bit more diligent with their process of evaluating a vendor. And one of the things that is asked often or not asked often enough is this situation about, how is the data backed up? Can we restore? How much data will we lose if there's an issue? Like, is it a once a week backup type of thing? And in many of these cases, you have zero control over the environment, but you can still get email notifications going, monitor the status of those backups with Backup Radar, of course, and at least bring the data into some kind of compliance and reporting.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, anything that can send email notifications can be monitored by Backup Radar. And some of those backups run on, as you said, a weekly basis, and just having visibility into that is good. Being able to report on that, understand what you're dealing with is the one of the most important things. If you have no idea how frequently something's running, it's in a black box over there, and they're monitoring it. You have no idea how often that's backing up, when it's backing up, when you'll be able to do a recovery from it. And yeah, it's not something that you have any other visibility into beyond that.
Well, it feels like, generally speaking, the backup category is one of those things that has the highest dose of emotions across the board in the daily activities of an MSP, whether it's, hey, we can't find the data that this customer end user suddenly lost or what have you. But I'm curious if there's been a success story that you've heard from a partner where the emotion was so tangible, something that saved their bacon, so to speak, that the emotion was so tangible that you could tell us about.
Yeah, there's been a few situations like that. A lot of them happen to be with brand new partners as they're getting set up and getting configurations put in place. Often, if they're not sure on what their configuration is, like, for example, they don't know how frequently something actually backs up. They don't know how that was configured. One of the first things to do is let's set that in a schedule in Backup Radar to expect it on a daily basis, and we'll start seeing where the red flags are and what the problems are. And there's a lot of times where they're not seeing anything coming through, and it's just no result. And I'm saying, what's going on with this one? There's got to be a problem here. This is a reputable backup application. I go and look at my backup application on the dashboard, and it's showing everything's green there. And we pause for a second. It's like, well, that's weird. Let's investigate that. Let's look at that. And so do a screen share, log in, you look at your dashboard. Let's just drill in. Let's actually look at the recovery points that are there. So you drill 2 or 3 layers down, and wait, the last recovery point was 2 weeks ago. Why am I seeing green on the dashboard? Well, some of those dashboards are showing the last time it attempted to back up was successful, not saying that it's been successful every single day since.
Right.
And so we've had a lot of times where it's just shocked that, whoa, I've been misunderstanding what this dashboard's been telling me this whole entire time, that I was actually potentially missing backups that weren't running, and I just so happened to not have needed it. And so thankfully they were able to go in and resolve the issue that was causing it from not backing up successfully in this period of time before they actually had any kind of event where they had to go and do a recovery and couldn't find the data.
Disaster avoided.
Exactly. And very happy from those situations.
Now, another thing that I hear so much from MSPs is the discussion around best in class or single pane of glass. And I think it's worth the conversation depending on the need and the specific vendor or the specific tool. And I love the fact that perhaps Backup Radar abstracts that conversation a bit. It kind of gives you the option of having a backup solution that is niche for a specific requirement or client set of circumstances, and be able to do something entirely different and still be able to consolidate the reporting and the ticketing management and all that stuff. I mean, what are your thoughts on best in class versus single pane of glass?
Well, I agree completely. There's been a lot of conversations that I've had that have both perspectives. A lot of people think that, no, I need one backup application that has everything in one single pane of glass, that I can just manage everything from there and not have to deal with other platforms. And then I have other MSPs that I've talked to that completely disagree with that. They're like, that if I fit every one of my partners into that backup product, they'd be either overpaying for what their needs are, or we would be kind of compromising what the actual business needs to try to fit it into this footprint. I want to be able to deal with any backup application that is in our list of backup products that we support, and custom build them into a solution that's for the client. And so they, previously to using Backup Radar, felt that they just had to deal with multiple backup applications and have different teams and different systems and have this massive dictionary of all the different processes to manage these systems, not realizing that they can bring it into Backup Radar. They can have one tool that's monitoring everything, that's putting consolidated tickets into their ticketing system. It doesn't matter what the reports look like from each different product. It comes out the other end looking the same information, same reports. Even if it's two different backup products for one client, they can provide a report that's combining them all together. And more recently, I talked to one of our partners who he mentioned that prior to using Backup Radar, he was kind of basically being like cherry picking, hand selecting the partners that he would work with based on the backup products that they already had subscriptions with or licenses with, and was actually turning people away because they weren't able to migrate their backup product to another solution. And he didn't want to be dealing with another vendor either transition or just supporting something that he wasn't familiar with. And he was able to adopt, like, bring your own backup kind of scenario and adopt a lot more partners and grow his business quite rapidly because he was able to safely and trusting the results that he's getting, because it's all coming through Backup Radar, watching for those missed backups, those no results and things like that, that not every backup product would have been able to provide on its own.
I love that. I think it's so important that we don't obsess over, because standardization again, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the standardization you're getting it in this case from the reporting, the ticket management, the compliance, even though you might have a completely unstandardized set of tool stacks, or applications in the backup space. I think you get to have both sides of the equation. And I think, it's a very philosophical thing. A lot of MSPs feel the need intrinsically to provide that option for their clients to use the thing that's right for them, and not have to force their hand into a certain product that's not the right fit. Like you said, it costs them a lot more. It doesn't meet their business outcomes and such. The backup ecosystem, I think, is evolving so much. You hear vendors constantly talking about, we're a new modern way of doing backups. I think generally the industry seems to be moving away from image-based backups. And not that we care Backup Radar, because, whatever the technology is, the reports are the reports. But I'm just curious sort of where you see, from your perspective of the reporting and the things that go wrong, where should backup, go in the future?
I think where backup should go in the future is focusing more on the actual, like right now there's a lot of focus on the output of the results. Did it succeed? Did it fail? Was it a warning? What was going on with that backup? Did the backup run and was it successful? Sometimes there's a lot of focus on that and not necessarily the focus on, is that backup recoverable? At the end of the day, the purpose of a backup is to restore data if needed, right? So backups run, is successful, great. But can I actually restore that data? And so actually looking at the validation, the data integrity aspect of things and checking and validating that is probably where a lot of the focus should be going, and rather than just check mark yes or no kind of thing. And are we good on that side? And some of the backup products are definitely getting to that point where they're doing self-tests and whatnot, but also just the method of doing the proper practice of validating, doing test restores, and meeting the compliance requirements on that side of things, and logging that so that you can prove that to a client, your due diligence, or even in some of the audit reports that some of the clients are these days requesting. That I think that's going to be one of the big things.
Defensibility, duty of care. I think all these things are sort of showing their teeth where insurance claims are concerned, where the customer was breached, and insurance is now investigating everybody involved in the entire chain of custody of the data. So certainly a lot of things that MSPs have to think about that is kind of, in the cybersecurity category perhaps, but still very much about backup.
They blend a lot now, yeah.
Well, the other thing that strikes me as kind of interesting, well, not interesting, but it's just a fact, backups are the number one way to recover from a cybersecurity incident where data was breached or you got encrypted or something like that. And we see, if you had lost a week of data versus 24 hours of data, it could mean the difference between your business recovering and not recovering in a situation like that.
Yeah.
So the knowledge and know-how that the backups are working, so critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, especially in those cybersecurity attacks, the risk increases because we're now dealing with multiple devices. It's not just a single device in those instances. It's full entire networks that are compromised, and the probability or the likelihood of one of those individual backups conveniently not succeeding at that particular time is greater when you're dealing with the whole entire network aspect of things as well. And so that's why the whole missed backup, no result monitoring of backup radar comes into a huge play there. So we're not just monitoring for those failures, but making sure that backups are actually succeeding and actually reporting into backup radar and giving you that peace of mind, essentially.
One of the things I think a lot of MSPs come in a little hesitant to turn on is the ticketing functionality. And I've talked about this a little bit because I think there is sort of a little bit of a once bitten, twice shy situation with just sending everything to your ticket system. It just becomes incredibly noisy and difficult to manage. I mean, to the point where at some point you just turn them off and just, hope for the best. Which is not a great strategy, of course. But tell me a little bit about the ticket management, some of the smart features in the dedupe and the grouping and the auto close, that kind of stuff I know is making a big difference in the noise level for MSPs and their ticketing systems. Yeah,
absolutely. It's funny how it's kind of an evolution as the MSP grows and matures through it. They get to the point where they say, I'm going to turn on ticketing for this stuff, or I got an API integration with a ticketing system with my backup application. This is great. Turn it on. It's just like, whoa, what just happened here? Up, Everything is, I don't need to know about all these different things. Like, that's fine. It's going to retry in an hour and succeed. And that one's not a critical issue. Why are you telling me about that one? It's just everything, really. And you said it exactly right. They just get overwhelmed and say, I can't do this. I'm turning it off. I'm just going to revert to monitoring a dashboard on a daily basis and looking for things that are bad. And obviously there's other challenges with that. So, and a lot of times they say, okay, well, this backup radar product looks like this is going to monitor that for me, so I don't have to do that. So let's tie this in, and it can give me a consolidated dashboard and give me all that stuff. And as we're going through onboarding, the recommendation always is, you have a supported ticketing system. Let's tie that in and let's get some intelligent ticketing going. Like, I don't know. I've done ticketing beforehand and it was not good. My team was not happy with it at all.
The noise, the blow up.
And it sometimes there's some conversations, some persuasion that has to happen. Like, let's talk about how that works. Let's talk about how we can dial things in with backup radar to give you what we're considering actionable notifications. We don't want you to get ticket noise. We don't want you to send everything through. The difference here is those integrations with the PSAs or email notifications that are being produced into a ticket through a PSA, they are reactionary. Something happens, it fires it over, automatically tickets there. Backup radar, the way that the ticketing works, there's multiple layers of configuration depending on the needs, but at the core, first and foremost, we are just ingesting the results. We're ingesting the results, and at specific times of the day, you would go and process the results that we've been looking at, we've been collecting basically. A lot of times it'd be the first thing in the morning, the team starting out, let's analyze the results from last night and produce tickets for things that were an issue last night, so we can go and resolve those ones. So there's various different filters and different parameters depending on what you're trying to accomplish, that we can filter through it. So if we find there's 20 some failures or potentially no results, because we're not just monitoring for the notifications that come in, but the lack of. Exactly. So we're sitting there, we know that server 01 should have ran last night, but it didn't. So we'll produce a no result ticket there. And a couple other ones might have been in a failure state. So we produce those tickets as well. If there's other multiple failures that happened that night, say that job was supposed to run hourly and it failed 3 times, a lot of other ticketing systems would have actually produced multiple tickets because it happened at 9 p.m., produce a ticket, 10 p.m., produce a ticket, 11 p.m., produce another ticket. Backup Radar, we're processing tickets at 8 a.m. We analyze it and we see that, oh, well, it failed, then was successful. We've logged all those ones, but we're not going to produce a ticket for it because it's now in a successful state. It doesn't matter. And for these other tickets that we do produce, if it was going to continually fail throughout the day, we'll auto append to the existing ticket. So not creating additional ticket noise. We're updating that ticket with additional information. So as that ticket is going through the queue, the tech's working on it, getting more information. They might be trying a few things to remediate it. If it tried again and failed again, it's updating right in that ticket log with them so they can see live as they're working on it what's actually happening with that backup result. And then if it was to succeed, whether they've touched the ticket yet or not, they have the option to go ahead and turn on auto closing. So it would automatically go in and say, oh, this had a successful result. It logs that note and closes the ticket off. So it's not sitting in their queue any longer, as it's now resolved. And lastly, there's obviously a lot of different backup applications and a lot of different backup strategies are doing multiple backups, right? You have an on-site, you have an off-site replication, all these different backup types, we'll call it.
A lot of opportunities for noise.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of the challenge that they're dealing with and just the direct communication with the backup application and the ticketing system is going to produce separate tickets. So we have grouping where you can turn on grouping, where you can group it by a company name or the device name or the job name, just depending on what backup strategy you're using, what backup application you're utilizing. Those different grouping practices can drastically reduce a ticket noise. Like think of like a Veeam backup job on like a Hyper-V environment where you have 25 different VMs. If that backup job failed, that'd be 25 different tickets. You can group those by job name to combine that to one ticket. You're going into that virtual environment to resolve that backup. You know it's one ticket. Done. You see it all done and close that one ticket off, basically.
Well, I know now that if you were to start an MSP tomorrow, the first tool you'd buy is
Backup Radar. we actually, funny enough, we had a partner sign up a couple weeks ago, and we went to do the onboarding with them. And the first question that the team always asks is like, so what backup applications are you using? And the response was like, oh, none. And we were stunned for a second. What do you mean? Oh, I'm just starting out. I'm about to get a PSA. I'm about to get the backup applications. I saw this tool and I realized I needed it. So I'm buying my products based on what integrates with your tool.
It's awesome. Well, Travis, it's so great to have you. We love having you at ScalePad. Of course, our partners have been made better and made whole by having you help them with their backup management and processes. Thanks for joining us today. For everybody else, thank you for spending some time with us. If you have yet to look at Backup Radar, we invite you to check out backupradar.com or scalepad.com and look at Backup Radar. And if you have questions, we're always available to help you out and have a look. In the meantime, hopefully you're not dealing with too much PTSD of those 3-hour, 4-hour, morning bouts with checking emails and such. And if you are, get in touch. We can make that a little bit easier for you. And thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks.